Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're really digging into something practical, how to get the absolute most out of the new GPT 4.1 model.
Yeah, we've been going through OpenAI's own
Hmm.
GPT 4.1 prompting guide from their cookbook.
Exactly, and our mission really is to pull out the key advice, the stuff you can use right away to get better results faster. Think of it as your fast track to getting up to speed.
hmm Because, while the basics of prompting haven't totally changed, GPT 4.1 definitely has its own
Hmm.
quirks, its own characteristics.
Yes.
And understanding those isn't just academic, it's really key if you want to unlock what this model can actually do in your own work.
Okay, so let's kick things off. The guide starts by saying GPT 4.1 follows instructions, well, much more literally than the older models. Sounds simple enough, maybe.
Mm.
But what does that really mean for how we should write our prompts day to day?
Well, think of it like this. The model is now a much more direct translator of exactly what you type. Where older versions might have kind of guessed or tried to figure out what you meant, GPT 4.1 really just takes your words at face value.
Hmm.
So if your prompt isn't super clear, the output might just miss the mark.
Ah,
The shift is really from a model that infers meaning to one that just executes explicitly. It means we have to be clearer, but, the upside is potentially more control.
that makes sense. Like having a very efficient assistant who maybe needs very precise instructions.
Exactly.
But here's where it gets interesting for me. The guide says that even though it's more literal, it's also more steerable with like simple single sentence corrections. How does that work? That sounds a bit contradictory.
Yeah, it does a bit, doesn't it? But it's a really interesting dynamic
Yeah.
because it sticks so closely to your first precise instruction.
Right.
A follow-up correction, if it's also precise, acts like a direct nudge. Think of it like adjusting a laser pointer. Tiny change at the source, big change at the target. If an older model went off track, sometimes it was hard to wrestle it back. But with GPT 4.1's literal nature, just a focused tweak in your next prompt can often do the trick.
Okay.
So yeah, initial clarity is vital, but refining the output with targeted feedback actually gets easier, more responsive. If you've ever felt frustrated trying to correct older models, this should feel better.
So building on that need for clear instructions, GPT 4.1 seems to open up doors for more autonomous AI stuff. Which leads us to agentic workflows. The guide mentions state-of-the-art performance on SWE Bench, verified for non-reasoning models. Now, for those of us maybe not deep in coding benchmarks, what exactly are agentic workflows and why is GPT 4.1 good at them?
Right. So agentic workflows basically mean the AI model takes on more of a problem-solving role by itself.
Hmm.
It executes a series of steps, maybe over several back and forth, maybe using tools
Okay.
to achieve a goal you set. It's moving beyond just one question, one answer, to the AI doing a more sustained, independent piece of work.
Got it.
And GPT 4.1's training seems to have really boosted its ability to handle these complex, multi-step jobs. SW Bench Verified is basically a standard test for how well AI agents solve actual software engineering problems.
Ah, okay.
So doing well there shows it's genuinely better at these autonomous tasks.
And to really make this work, the guide suggests three specific system prompt reminders. Let's start with the first one, persistence. What's that about?
Persistence is basically about telling the model up front, look, this might take a few steps, don't stop until the whole job is actually finished. You want to prevent it from just giving up too early.
Right, makes sense.
The example they give is, you are an agent, please keep going until the user's query is completely resolved before ending your turn and yielding back to the user. Only terminate your turn when you are sure that the problem is solved. It just sets the expectation.
Okay, yeah, critical for complex stuff. Then the second reminder is tool calling. Why the explicit reminder to use tools here?
Tool calling is all about keeping the model grounded by telling it directly, hey, use your tools if you need info, like reading a file or checking code. You stop it from just guessing or making stuff up, which it might otherwise do. The reminder is something like, if you are not sure about file content or code-based structure, use your tools. Do not guess or make up an answer. It's really about reliability.
Makes perfect sense. And the third one, which they say is optional, is planning. When would you want to add that in?
You'd use the planning reminder when you want the model to be more deliberate, more transparent about how it's tackling the problem. You prompt it to actually outline its steps, maybe reflect on whether a tool worked, all in plain language before it acts again. The example is pretty clear. You must plan extensively before each function call and reflect. Do not do this entire process by making function calls only. It's like telling it to think out loud.
And just adding those reminders gave a 20% boost on that SWE bench score. That's significant.
It really is.
So for anyone building apps where the AI needs to act more autonomously, these sound like, well, essential starting points.
Absolutely. They're like the guardrails, the basic operating instructions for the agent mode.
Okay, let's zoom in on the tool calls themselves for a second. The guide strongly recommends only using the specific tools field in the OpenAI API request. Why that? Instead of just, describing the tools in the main prompt.
Yeah, they're pretty firm on that. Using that structured tools field basically cuts down on ambiguity. The model knows exactly where to look for tool definitions and how they work.
Right.
And their own tests showed a 2% improvement on SW bench just by using this cleaner method. It's just more robust, less likely to cause errors.
And any best practices for actually defining the tools in that field?
Clarity, clarity, clarity. Give tools really clear names, make the descriptions detailed and unambiguous. Same for the parameters each tool takes. And if you want to show examples of how to use a tool, they say put that in a separate #examples section in your main system prompt. Don't stuff it into the tool's description field itself.
Keep it separate.
Yeah. They even suggest checking out the Generate Anything feature in the prompt playground for inspiration on how to define tools well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, be precise, use the API structure, keep descriptions focused.
Got it. Okay, moving on. The guide talks about prompting-induced planning. This sounds a bit like chain of thought prompting, but they also say GPT 4.1 isn't inherently a reasoning model. So how do we get it to do that step-by-step thinking out loud thing?
Right. So it might not have like a dedicated internal reasoning module like some other models are designed to have, but you can effectively guide it to produce a step-by-step plan.
How?
By using variations of that planning prompts component we just talked about. You're basically prompting it to articulate its thought process as part of the output. And even without that dedicated reasoning architecture, they found using these explicit planning prompts still gave them a 4% bump on SWE bench. So it's a really useful technique for breaking down complex tasks within the prompt.
That's definitely a good trick to have up your sleeve for harder problems. Okay, let's shift gears slightly. Long context. GPT 4.1 has this massive 1 million token input window. What are the big wins and maybe the watch-outs with that much context?
Well, the huge win is obviously you can feed it much, much more information. Whole documents, long conversations, big chunks of code.
Yeah.
This lets it do things like really deep document analysis, find information across large texts, even some reasoning that connects distant pieces of info.
Good.
But performance isn't always perfect across that whole million tokens. If the task requires finding one tiny needle in a massive haystack, or involves really complex reasoning over the entire thing simultaneously, you might see performance drop off a bit.
Okay, so it's not magic.
Not entirely magic, no. You still need to be smart about what you feed it and how you ask your questions.
And how should we think about the mix between the info we provide in that context window versus the model's own built-in knowledge?
That's a really good point. The guide mentions you should think about whether you want the model only using the document you gave it, or if it's okay for it to bring in its general knowledge too.
Can you control that?
Yes, you can actually put instructions in the prompt to guide that. Like literally saying, only use the information provided in this document. Or, conversely, allowing it to use general knowledge if it's relevant. It lets you fine-tune where it gets its answers from.
That's quite subtle but powerful. And lastly, for long context, how should we actually structure the prompt itself for best results when we are feeding it a ton of text?
Placement matters. Their research shows the best way is to put your main instructions both at the very beginning and again at the very end of all the context material.
Beginning and end.
Yep. If you only put them once, putting them at the beginning before the big chunk of text is generally better than putting them only at the end. It just helps keep the model focused on the goal, even with all that data.
That's a super practical tip. Okay, the guide also circles back to instruction following more generally. It repeats that GPT 4.1 is good at it, but also warns that prompts which worked fine for, say, GPT-4 might need adjusting. Why is that again?
It really comes back to that literalness we started with, because it follows the exact words so closely. Any assumptions or little shortcuts that maybe older models just figured out, well, GPT 4.1 might miss them if they aren't spelled out. You just need to be more explicit.
So what's the recommended way to actually build and refine instructions specifically for 4.1?
They suggest a kind of layered approach. Start broad with general response rules or overall instructions, then add specific sections for particular things, like maybe a hashtag sample phrases section or hashtag workflow steps if it's a process.
They're building blocks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And for sequential tasks, use numbered lists. They work really well. When things go wrong, the first thing is check your instructions. Are they conflicting? Vague. Just wrong.
Makes sense.
Adding clear examples of what you do want and even pointing to those examples in your rules helps a lot. And they also mention, don't bother with old tricks like shouting in Cap S or weird formatting incentives. They probably won't help and might even confuse this model.
They also mention some common mistakes, right? Like telling the model to always use a tool before answering.
Yeah, that's a good one. If you force it to always call a tool, but it doesn't actually have the info needed for the tool call,
Yeah.
it might just make up the inputs.
Oh.
Right. So the fix is better instruction, like adding a condition. If you don't have enough info for the tool, ask the user first. It just highlights needing more precise, robust rules.
And what about using sample phrases?
Well, if you give examples but don't tell the model to, vary its language, it might just parrot your examples back verbatim, which sounds unnatural. Same with being too wordy or using excessive formatting if you don't specifically tell it not to. The guide has an example prompt, customer service, that apparently shows these best practices. Well, specific rules, extra sections for clarity, good examples. It really comes down to clear, structured instructions being the foundation.
Got it. Okay, finally, there's an appendix on generating and applying file diffs. This sounds super relevant for developers. What's the main news here? GPT 4.1 is better at this.
Yes, significantly better, it seems. Better accuracy, better quality when generating code diffs, those snippets showing changes between file versions.
Okay.
And OpenAI has even open-sourced a specific format they recommend called the V4A diff format, which the model is trained on. Using that format, plus a tool they provide called ApplyPatch, seems to be the most reliable way now to get the AI to handle code changes.
V4A diff format. Can you give us a quick sense of what that looks like?
Sure, it's designed to be readable, but also robust. Crucially, it doesn't rely on line numbers, which can be fragile. Instead, it uses context. Well, a diff block starts with an action, add, update, delete, then the file path. For changes, it shows code chunks before and after, using minus signs for old lines, plus signs for new lines. And there's an @ symbol that helps locate the change, often by specifying the class or function name, especially if the surrounding lines aren't unique.
Ah, clever.
Yeah, and they provide a Python script, applypatch.py, to actually apply these diffs programmatically.
Yeah.
They also mentioned a couple of other formats that worked okay in their tests, like search replace and a kind of pseudo XML, which also avoid line numbers and clearly mark old new code.
Yeah.
But V4A seems to be the main recommendation. For devs, this could really streamline workflows involving AI code generation or modification.
Okay, so let's quickly recap this deep dive into the GPT 4.1 prompting guide. We've hit on GPT 4.1 being more literal, needing clearer prompts, but being more steerable.
Right.
We talked about agentic workflows and those key reminders, persistence, tool calling, and planning.
Yep, and the performance boost they give.
We covered the best way to use the tool's API, how to induce planning even without inherent reasoning, and optimizing prompts for that huge, long context window. Remember, instructions at the start and end.
Exactly. And the importance of clear, structured instructions generally, avoiding common pitfalls.
And finally, those improved code diffing capabilities, especially using that V4A format.
That covers the main points. The real takeaway, though, is probably just to take these ideas and try them out. Experiment in your own projects.
Totally.
Getting a feel for how GPT 4.1 actually responds differently based on these prompt strategies is where you'll really unlock its potential for whatever you're trying to do.
Well said. And with that, maybe a final thought for everyone listening. Given how sensitive GPT 4.1 seems to be to these prompting nuances, what completely new kinds of AI tools or automated workflows might now be possible if we get even better at crafting these instructions? It's a pretty exciting space to watch. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.